Thank you. Good afternoon. The first question that probably is, why is the state guy talking during a section where it talks about local agencies and local groups? That's a question that I had myself till the topic that came up, which is basically trying to coordinate between MAP-21 and local agency. And I think it will have a significant effect on local agencies, and then consequently on the industry, on what kind of treatments or how the local agencies will select the type of treatments, and even how state agencies select the type of treatments that are going to be placed on our highways and roadways. So MAP-21 says we want pavement to be in a good state of repair. We have this. They've set the federal and state goals have to be set for how much of our inventory is going to be in what condition. The idea is to go with the sustainable management, and then the bigger one is the transparency. You know, like you just mentioned, a lot of local agencies are getting their own sources of funding, and in California we got, like I mentioned yesterday, about $52 billion over 10 years. So now, once they give us the money, now they want accountability for it. And it's justified. I mean, if we're spending that kind of money, and if everybody's paying a lot of money to use the gas tax, we need to have accountability. So that is another key aspect of it. Just a few basic metrics that MAP-21 looks for. The four metrics are IRI, cracking, rutting, and faulting. And they classify everything into those three groups: good, fair, and poor. And each state has different ways of classifying their pavement as good, fair, and poor, and what they would consider as good, fair, and poor. And in California, we still use red, yellow, green as our color to classify pavements as good, fair, and poor, and they're not the same as what federal government came up with. So that leads to a lot of issues as far as how the money is obtained, how we spend the money. So that is something that you may want to take a look at if you're either a local agency or a state government, because that would make a difference. We were going through the red, yellow, green process and describing our pavement and doing our pavement management that way. But then when the FHWA came up with their good, fair, and poor, we had to look at it and go, okay, how do we manage it? Because 80% comes from federal government, so we need to make sure we satisfy them, yet we also satisfy the way we have been managing pavements for years. One of the things is, where do we measure as far as MAP-21 is concerned? We take the interstate system, pretty simple, and then the national highway system, which includes both the state highway and the local highways. The good, fair, and poor, you have those the four metrics that you saw earlier, but then you go one step further and say if you need to have at least two of those metrics in poor to be considered as poor by the federal standard. So there are some of these nuances that are there that one needs to be familiar with, and then based on that you report how much is in good, fair, and poor. And then, as usual, the stick that FHWA carries is if you have a certain percentage of your pavement in the poor condition in 2 consecutive years, then they'll start taking your money away. So that's why, even though sometimes these look like some statistical ways or some just statements, you need to pay attention to it because it has consequences. But on the flip side, the federal government has said, for the first few years, don't worry about it, do the reporting, if we need to make some adjustments, we'll make it. So people don't need to panic based on this, thinking that next year they're going to lose money, but this is something that kind of influences the way we measure the pavement condition, the way we report it, and how we use that information in our pavement management program. At the MAP-21 state level, we have to set condition targets, we have to report on those conditions, and then as we have all seen or heard the last couple of days, the asset management plan needs to be done, and then we all have to come up with certain rules on how we manage the funding that we get. Why asset management? Like I said before, MAP-21 requires a performance-based budgeting, which is pretty simple thing to do if you know what you're doing, and which is the right thing to do. You know, you're given money, you need to make sure that you show performance for that. the federal government was going through this MAP-21, this performance-based budgeting. In California, we had our own measures of how to come up with performance measures and be held accountable. And that's where we got this additional money that I've been talking about. And we need to have good information to make good decisions. And then a lot of legislative folks look at this because they worry about their next election or the next recall. So they keep very close tabs on what gets done in their area. So accountability of public funds, whether they truly want to be accountable or not, but that's a good buzzword that we use. Here are some comparisons between what the MAP-21 requirements are and what California requirements are. Most of them are very, very similar, except you have performance targets only using the national performance measures. That's only on the national highway system, whereas for us, it applies to all the national and the state highway system. So it's a lot longer or a lot bigger inventory that we need to look at. Also, the requirements. Federal government is looking just at the pavement and bridge, but when our legislator gave us the money, they said you not only look at pavement and bridges, but you also look at culverts and ITS systems, anything else that they can tack on. And this is where we get into the project-based, more comprehensive look of coming up with projects as opposed to, preservation treatment, a project that does chip seals. It's a multi-objective project. And that could also influence the way we select the treatment that we do, because we're doing multi-objective treatment. So again, this is something that locals will have to be looking at. Maybe it doesn't apply to them as at this time, but as we move forward, these are some of the things that could influence your decision making. Just briefly, National Highway System deals with interstate, arterial, and the principal roadways. In California, we have about 14,000 center lane miles. California itself has, the state system is only about 5,000, so there is a significant amount of those center lane miles that fall under local jurisdiction. So if we look at a breakdown, you'll see there is a huge chunk of it is local agency, 180,000 center lane miles. But the MAP-21 covers about 15,000. Before MAP-21 came into play, the things that we used to measure at the state level used to be the IRI for all pavements, the cracking, faulting for concrete pavements. These were the main key things that we focused on, and the local agencies, primarily, they looked at the PCI, Pavement Condition Index. That's what they were looking at. What we had as part of HPMS, we would ask for a lot of this information because we have to report. That's not something new that has been going on for years. We had a bunch of requirements, street name, location, the IRI or PCI, the surface type, rutting, and all these list of things that we would have the locals report or ask the locals to provide that information. We would get most of it except for the ones that have been struck out. IRI, rutting or faulting, and cracking percentage and length. This is something that locals would not be doing it. They did not have to do it, so they would not report on those kind of things. But if you look at MAP-21, those are the four main things that are required by MAP-21. So again, this does influence the way locals look at their performance measurement of their pavement. What we did was we had to report it based for our California Transportation Commission. We had to report it on our entire state highway system and the national highway system. So for us, coordination with local agencies became very critical. We have held numerous workshops, and I'll briefly mention them further down the road, but we had a lot of workshops that had to be held to kind of bring everybody on board. We have between local agencies and cities and counties about 530 or 540 entities. So not all of them are on board, and there are some counties that have 5 miles of national highway system, and they're not interested in this as much. But as a state, we had to do that coordination, bring them all together on board so that everybody is on the same footing when they come to look at this information. So what Caltrans does is we have an automated pavement condition survey. We used to do it manually, but then about 4 years ago we switched to the automated pavement condition survey. And we have been doing that only on the state highway system, and then go to the locals and say, provide your information and we will use that. But recently we have started doing it ourselves even on the local highways. So that at least when we report it, it is uniform. It's the same measure that's reported across different counties, and there is no gaming going on. Not that somebody would want to do it intentionally. It's just like they don't have the resources to go do that. When we started off doing the pavement condition survey, it was just the first 100 feet of a mile section in one lane, and that would be it. But now we do 100% of all lanes, all kinds of roadways. We take this information and then report that in the form of good, fair, and poor under the MAP-21. And then this also helps us to establish targets for pavement on the national highway system. And then once you obviously set the targets, you know where you are with your condition, and then you do the gap analysis and then get your funding allocation for it. We had several, like I said, we had several workshops to figure out how to come up with these targets, because each entity or local agency was at a different level in their accomplishment. Some had almost 80–90% of their pavement in good condition. Some had 80–90% of their pavement in poor condition because of the way the funding worked out, based on the population. If they belong to an MPO, then some MPOs divvy up their money uniformly. Some divvy up based on where the population group is and who can influence more, and those kind of things. We had to have a real down-to-earth conversation with a lot of people saying, how do we want to set these targets? So we gave them 3 options, and it depends on which option you choose, what kind of effort you have to do, how much people are aware of the effort it takes, and how they need to, how much they need to spend to get there. So the first option is the state does the deterioration model. We use our unit prices and come up with their condition, their needs, and set their targets. Now that's all based on state numbers and state deterioration models. Some agencies, local agencies like that, some local agencies don't like that. So the other option was we'll use the financial information or the expenditures based on what our projects are, and then let the state, the local entities set up their own targets of what target they want to meet. And then the third one is give everything to the local agencies and say, okay, come up with your targets, come up with your allocation, you do the entire thing for your area, and then we will combine it together and present it as the state's position to FHWA. So again, based on the targets established, the effort required by each agency is going to be different, and it's going to be a lot of effort if you choose the first one, the last one, to do everything. But at the end, Caltrans would put all of this thing, weigh it with the infrastructure that they have, the inventory, and then come up with the report for the state of California. And I think if you do that, California roads should at least rank much higher than the 46th or 47th we rank right now. And the main thing, because it's a huge shift from the way we have been doing business, we had a lot of workshops. We're going to continue to have a lot of workshops. FHWA has come out on these workshops and worked with us to provide this information and training on how to deal with MAP-21 and to report the condition of our highway, and then from there, how do you manage your pavement? That's the bottom line. And then that influences the industry based on how they manage it, what kind of projects come out and what kind of work is going to be done. Again, we talked the condition of the inventory, the life cycle cost development, and then based on that, develop the California Transportation Asset Management Plan. And we have a draft plan developed that was submitted to our California Transportation Commission earlier this month. So they take a look at it, and then they give their ultimate blessings on it, because all the projects, before they're done, has to get their blessings. So that's where we are as far as our asset management plan is. And we plan to have additional meetings and additional coordination. And I think if something like that happens in your state or in your local agency is involved, you need to be involved in this and provide your input, because this does have a huge influence over the next decade or two on how we manage our pavements and make sure our pavement conditions are properly addressed. So that's why it's a critical thing to pay attention to. Thank you very much.
The preceding video was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found at tsp2.org. That's tsp2.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.